Hello, my name is Dawn McAdams. I'm the lead nurse for Richland School District 2. This is an updated Stop the Bleed presentation from last year. The American College of Surgeons has made a more user-friendly layperson version. So we're going to go through the basics again just as a good review, and it will be new information for new employees. So just as a quick recap, all of this came out of the Hartford Consensus Statement, which was a partnership with the Connecticut Governor's Office, the Highway Patrol, the White House, Homeland Security, that we need to get people to learn how to stop the bleed, to make it just as common as using an AED. These are some of the other partners that have had participation and ideas in the whole Stop the Bleed campaign. Again, some of these images may be a little bit disturbing. They've removed a lot of the photographs from last year, so just be warned, there's one or two pictures in here that may make you a little uncomfortable. So why do we need this training? Well, we have learned that the number one cause of preventable death from injury is bleeding. We've learned this unfortunately through Iraq and Afghanistan, where tourniquets have come back into play and learning how to stop the bleed. Where can you use this training? Really just about anywhere, whether you're at school, you're at work, you're at home, motor vehicle collision, weather storms. Of course, we always hear about gun violence and shootings, but that's not the only case where you may need to use your Stop the Bleed training. So first, we need to identify and recognize life-threatening bleeding. And then number two, you're going to learn to take the steps on how to stop that bleeding, whether that's with pressure, with packing, or with tourniquets. Number one priority is always your safety. If you're injured, you cannot render aid to help others. So you do not put yourself in a scene until it is safe to do so. If the situation changes or becomes unsafe or you feel uncomfortable, you need to stop what you're doing, back off, and move yourself to safety. If you're able to pull the victim with you, go ahead and do that, but do not put your life at risk at any time. You always want to wear gloves if you are able. If you get blood on you, be sure to clean it off as soon as possible. And here in Richland 2, you would let your workman's comp person know that you have been exposed to someone else's blood, and we would send you for a workman's comp workup. Again, we're going to learn the ABCs just like we did before. A is alert, call 911. B stands for bleeding, and C is to compress. So A, alert, call 911. Here in the school, you need to remember we have to call 911. You want to know your location. It's important to know where you are. If you are at home, if you were on a field study, to know the address where you are. And you want to be able to give clear, concise instructions to the 911 operator. Then we come to bleeding. When you're looking for bleeding, you need to find the source for bleeding. You want to look for bleeding that's pooling, that's spurting, large volumes, all over the floor, clothes are saturated with it. Want to find that and expose the area. That may mean cutting, tearing, ripping the clothes to find where that bleeding is coming from. The person may be bleeding from multiple sources. And the reason you need to find the source is that clothing can hide other bleeding sources. So we can have bleeding from the arms and the legs, the neck, the armpits and the groin, or from the body, and we'll go over a little bit of each of those. The next part will be to compress or to apply a pressure. You want to apply direct pressure to that wound. You want to press down with a gauze or some type of soft material and press as hard as you can until the bleeding stops. You don't want to stop and lift it up and peek and see if there is still bleeding going on. Use just enough gauze to cover the wound and keep that pressure on until help arrives. This is an example of a training model that people can use to practice packing a wound. And last year we did that with our little pool noodles and had staff stuff and pack gauze down into the wound. When you're packing a wound, you have to make sure you're really stuffing the gauze, the soft material, down into the wound. If it's deep, you can see in letter A where they actually have pressed their fingers down into the wound and stuffed the gauze. and letter B below where they're holding surface pressure. In the second photograph, you can see where blood continues to come up. So B is not effective. You need to really stuff and pack that wound to stop the bleeding. This again is a picture of quick clot, which is a type of gauze that is impregnated with a clotting factor. Our Stop the Bleed kits that are in our schools, the red kits, do have a version of a quick clot in there, and that just helps the blood to clot when you pack it in the wound. Compressing or packing. We know we can do that on the arms or the legs. Those are easy places. If you have a large wound, you can stuff gauze into it. Neck, armpits, and groin, you can only do packing. We cannot apply a tourniquet to someone's neck. When you're using the gauze and you're stuffing it and packing it into the neck area, the armpit, or the groin, you may need to use extra pressure from your elbow or your knee to help compress that area. Wounds that are to the body, to the torso, to the chest, the abdomen, the back, those need to be as rapidly transported to the hospital as possible because they will need surgery. The other option is tourniquets. You all learned last year on how to use a tourniquet. You're going to apply it 2 to 3 inches above the wound. You don't want to place it over the knee or elbow because you're not going to compress that artery tight enough to stop the bleeding. You want to tighten it until the bleeding stops, and you don't want to remove that tourniquet. Tourniquets are easy to apply. You can apply it to yourself. You can apply it to others. They can be applied over clothing. Tourniquets hurt. They hurt a lot. The person is going to be uncomfortable. They're going to be crying out in pain, but that doesn't mean you've put it on incorrectly. A second tourniquet may also be required to stop the bleeding. The second tourniquet would go above the first tourniquet. This is just an example of someone's arm. You could easily put a tourniquet over their shirt. These are different tourniquets that are commercially available, and I would caution you, if you are purchasing a tourniquet for your own use, to get a name brand kit. If you're ordering off of Amazon or other online sources, please stick to a name brand kit. You want something that says it's a cat tourniquet or a soft T. These are some different examples that are used around the US. The cat tourniquet we have in our big orange trauma bags in the district, and in the soft T tourniquet is in the small red Stop the Bleed kits that are in classrooms, and I'll show you examples of these in a minute. These are other recommended tourniquets. They're just names. The important thing is to stick with a known provider when you're ordering these and to get a name brand. If you get an off-brand, it could be cheap plastic that is going to break, and then you have a useless tourniquet. Bleeding control in children. In all but the very small, tiny children, you can use a tourniquet. If you have an infant or a very small child, you can provide pressure just by wrapping your hands around their arm. Basically, you're wanting to compress tight enough that you're compressing that artery and stopping bleeding. You can do wound packing on infants just like we do on children or adults. Sometimes we get asked questions. What if someone has something impaled or stuck in their arm or their leg? Do I pull it out? Well, no, you don't want to pull that impaled object out. That object is helping stop the bleed some. You may still need to apply a tourniquet above the object that is impaled in the arm or the leg, but you don't want to take it out. Your bleeding will increase, and you will also hide the wound track that is a risk for more infection. Improvised tourniquets. People ask, well, how about I just use my belt? We have not been trained to be survivalist type people that we learn how to improvise. For me to use a belt or a non-standard tourniquet would not work. You want to use standard tourniquets and not try and make one from devices that you have around. Loss of an arm or a leg. That is a risk using a tourniquet, but what we have found from Afghanistan and Iraq is that people have had tourniquets in place for 2 hours and not have loss of an arm or a leg, but they survived. Where in years past, they bled to death because of the bleeding from their arm or their leg. Pain, yes, it absolutely hurts. People will scream and cry out in pain, but the good thing is when EMS arrives, they will be able to give them pain medication. One point about EMS arriving: when there is some kind of a situation, whether it's a natural disaster, whether it's a shooting, EMS is going to have to wait until the scene is clear. So when we did our active shooter drill last summer in August of 2018, it was well over an hour before EMS was able to enter the building, and that's why it's so important for you as a Richland 2 employee to understand the basics of how to stop the bleeding. EMS had to wait until the sheriff's department cleared the building and made it safe to come in. If it were some kind of a natural disaster, we would have to wait for the fire department to clear the building and render it safe for EMS and other people to come in. So if you have other questions, please don't hesitate to reach out to me. Again, I'm Dawn McAdams. I'm the lead nurse. I'm housed at the Richland 2 Institute of Innovation, or you can just simply ask your school nurse. And here in just a minute, I am going to show you the 2 types of tourniquets that we have available here in Richland 2. This is the soft T tourniquet. This is the tourniquet that is in the red bleeding control kits located in some classrooms. You can see there's a little clip here and another metal clasp, and it clicks on, and then you're going to pull this as tight as you can make it. You don't want any slack. So if this were on my arm, I would pull it as tight as I can, and then you're going to turn the windlass or the stick, doesn't matter, clockwise, counterclockwise, as tight as you can until the bleeding stops. And then this little triangle comes up and secures that windlass in place. And that's a very simple one to use. If you're having to turn it more than 4 or 5 times, you probably have too much slack. You need to come back and pull hard on the tourniquet itself so you can make sure this part is tight enough before you start trying to turn the windlass. Our other type of tourniquet, the cat tourniquet, is also available. These are in our big orange bags that are probably in your school nurse's office, and they're with Velcro. So the Velcro comes on. You're going to tighten it as tight as you can. Again, it has a windlass, a stick. You're going to turn it clockwise, counterclockwise, and it fits into a little clip here. And then once that is on, you can put the little white tag over and write the time. So again, they're very easy to use. Your nurse has trainers. If you would like a refresher, please see your nurse. If you are a new employee, your nurse will be getting with you to ensure that you understand how to use these tourniquets. Just in summary, remember, we're always first concerned about your personal safety. Be alert to your surroundings. If you're calling 911, don't insert yourself into the situation until you know you are safe. B is to find that bleeding. Look for pooling, spurting, lots of blood. You want to cut the clothing, remove. You want to find where that bleeding is coming from. And then C, compress. You're either going to do direct pressure, you can pack the wound, or wait for and apply a tourniquet. And always you're going to wait for help to arrive. For more information, you can go to bleedingcontrol.org or stopthebleed.org. Thank you for your attention and have a great day. And this is the soft T tourniquet that you will find located in the red bleeding control kits located in some classrooms in Richland 2.